Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Jones, Police Chief for City of Stockton. Here to talk about the gunfire location alert and analysis system known as ShotSpotter. And I'd like to introduce some people who are here with me today. To my right, your left, is San Joaquin County Sheriff Steve Moore. And Sheriff Moore partners with us on numerous task forces, most specific to the gun violence. We work together with the countywide gang task force, as well as the countywide Firearms Violence Reduction Consortium. Also, to my left is ATF Special Agent in Charge, Joe Reel, and he will be speaking today a little bit about our partnerships as well. And we work with ATF and a number of task forces, and also have had some very successful operations, including the fairly recent Operation Gideon. And also with me today is President and CEO of ShotSpotter, Ralph Clark, who will also be speaking about our partnership today. As Police Chief in Stockton, reducing gun violence and crime in our community is of absolute paramount importance. In fact, it is our #1 priority. And that is why we simply do things a little bit differently now than we used to. And we do that through a number of ways. Number one, we really do embrace our regional and collaborative efforts because we know no one can do it alone. We also keenly focus on gun violence and gang violence and how it is impacting our community. And we also rely today on technology like never before. Cutting-edge technology we understand is the new way of doing business, and we absolutely must embrace it to be able to police the way we need to in today's age. I can't stress enough the importance of our collaborative efforts, as well as the engagement of the community and our efforts to combat crime here in Stockton. And again, a number of ways we do that are through our countywide task forces, and I'd like to talk about those briefly first. The countywide gang task force is something Sheriff Moore and I put into place because we realize that a lot of our gun violence is driven by gangs here in our community, as well as our countywide Firearms Reduction Consortium, which works on identifying the gun problem, the offenders, and apprehending them and prosecuting them. We also have a top firearms examiner that works with the consortium, Rocky Edwards, who has a system called Gun Ops that we use here in Stockton. Again, it's new technology and new ways of doing business. And again, we work with ATF in a number of operations and ongoing task force to really deal with our gun problem in this community. Technology such as the gunfire alert location system and its analysis is really us policing smarter. It's a perfect example of real-time intelligence and applying that to real-time policing. The use of technology and new intelligence greatly supports the way that we police. And really, there are 4 primary ways how the Stockton Police Department is really benefiting from this new technology for us. Number one, it pinpoints chronic gunfire locations. So there are often times where there is a residence, for example, in a neighborhood, where the neighborhood feels under siege because there's chronic gunfire from that area. Sometimes the community reports it, sometimes they don't, but this is an absolute precise locator of that gunfire and assists us in being able to deal with that and give some relief to the very communities. It tracks and analyzes gunfire incidents, so it helps us be much more data-driven than we have been in the past. It ties incidents together, so we get better investigations and we get better prosecutions based on the evidence and intelligence that it provides. And it provides better and swifter police response. I mentioned before that sometimes a resident or a citizen will call in a report of gunfire. Sometimes they don't know the exact location of where that gunfire is, but ShotSpotter helps us in knowing where that precise location is. Now, I do want to make clear that by no means is this a replacement for the need for community involvement, for the need for the community to continue to report these things. We still need that human element. We still need that human interaction. We still need human witnesses. However, this technology, again, does not replace it. It just enhances it. We began this 9-month pilot program with ShotSpotter in August, and it covers a couple square mile area in an undisclosed portion of the city of Stockton. And since August, we have seen about a 50% reduction in the amount of gunfire incidents in that area. Now, we're not exactly certain how much of that is attributed to seasonal changes, to our other proactive efforts that are going on in Stockton, but we do know that the intelligence given to us through ShotSpotter has led to multiple arrests of what I believe are some very chronic shooters. So it probably has given some relief to that neighborhood. So the early figures are very encouraging. And I want to talk a little bit about some of those specific examples where Stockton Police Department has used this gunfire detection system to address and resolve criminal activity. First, it has assisted us in some homicide investigations, where the intelligence given through the exact ShotSpotter data has helped us with our investigation. And of course, I can't discuss details of that yet as to how it's assisting in the homicide investigation, but it is an extra piece of intelligence and evidence that assists us. It also works with other technology, and I'll give an example where the gunfire alert system worked really hand in hand with another excellent tool of technology, which is our camera system. We have over 100 pan-tilt zoom cameras across the city. We have some camera operators that zoom in and operate those camera systems. And there was an incident where the gunfire location alert told us about some gunshots. The camera operators and police officers working on the streets, the boots on the ground, were given that information. And the camera operators were able to actually zoom in on whom we believed were the shooters. And were able to vector in the police officers into that area, make the arrest. And in that exact incident, not only did they arrest the shooter, not only did they find the actual firearm that was used in the shooting, they also found other weapons that were in possession with that suspect. In another incident, officers responded to a gunshot alert in a neighborhood, and they responded to the residents and found that the shooter was still in the front yard with the rifle. And again, an apprehension was made in that. These are examples of very swift response where ShotSpotter helps us with the boots on the ground officers getting to those scenes. In another incident, an alert was activated from a home we later found was known for a lot of gang activity. I believe this is an example where a residence was having a chronic gunfire. The neighborhood actually did feel under siege. Well, in this case, the officers responded and were able to precisely know where the gunfire came from. They were able to find some evidence on the ground, shell casings, and it actually aided in getting a search warrant, the ability to later enter the home, make proper arrests, recover firearms, ammunition, and even narcotics in this case. So again, an excellent tool as to where ShotSpotter gives us the information we need to make these types of arrests. And a final example, and actually this one is portrayed up here on the placard, which we can come up and look at a little bit later. In that example, at an intersection, a vehicle was fired upon by multiple shooters, 2 shooters, and it hit the vehicle multiple times. Well, based on the ShotSpotter gunfire location alert, we were able to respond. We were able to get all of the evidence that we needed in that case, and that same day, we were able to arrest both shooters, and we were able to, the intelligence and evidence assisted in the investigation. Both actually pled guilty and are up for state prosecution and state time. So that is an example where we have very violent offenders out on the streets, and this technology is aiding us in getting them off the streets. These are just a few examples of how this gunfire alert system and analysis is helping Stockton Police Department. There are many more. We look forward to further analyzing the data. We look forward to the continuation of our pilot program here in Stockton, because we do believe this is an extra tool on our tool belt to help us with the fight on gun violence. But as I mentioned before, we do continue to urge the public to report all gunfire incidents. We need that information. We need them as potential witnesses. We need the history of what's going on in the neighborhood. And especially as we enter the New Year celebratory gunfire season, we again urge the public, do not fire your guns within the city or in other areas. As you all know, the bullet goes up, it must come down somewhere, and we have had incidents where people have been injured based on that type of celebratory gunfire. So it's very important to not do so because it's very dangerous to the public. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Ralph Clark, CEO of ShotSpotter, to go over the system a little bit. Thank you, Ralph.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chief. Really appreciate it. Well, I don't know if there's much I can add to that. Thank you so much, Chief. We're quite honored to be here in Stockton, California, and work with such a progressive chief and agency, knowing how to leverage the data that ShotSpotter provides to get at these chronic trigger pullers. As many of you know, our company has been around for approximately 15 years. We're in about 6 locations here in California, 75 locations globally, growing to 80. And we're very proud to work with cities and agencies that want to get at chronic gun violence issues. I can't emphasize enough, as the chief has already emphasized, that this is just one tool of a very complete tool set that agencies have at their disposal to get at gun crime. But probably the most important element in gun violence abatement is the positive engagement of communities. This is just not a law enforcement issue. This is a community issue, and we really need communities to get on side in partnering with their law enforcement agencies, knowing that law enforcement agencies are empowered to respond to these particular gunfire incidents, to get on board, get engaged, and really say no to gun violence in our communities. And we're very, again, excited and committed to continue this partnership. We're delighted to work here in Stockton, because Stockton is really on the forefront in terms of how an agency with very little resources can make the most effective use of those resources to go tackle a very important problem. So with that, thank you very much again, Chief. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you. And from ATF, I mentioned Special Agent in Charge Joe Reel is here. So Joe, if you have some words for us. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Morning, everyone. As you've heard both from the Chief and from Mr. Clark, the successes that Stockton has been having because of the progressive posture that they've taken in regards to curbing firearms violence has been very good, and they are all to be commended, the law enforcement community as a whole, and technology. As you're all well aware, ATF has 2 primary goals that we focus on, and that's reducing firearms violence, violent crime, and protecting the public. And in doing so, we've kind of changed the way we approach things as well. And if you recall back when I first got here, we met with the chief and we developed a strategy to go forward with a surge we did for 4 months where we've been very successful. And it's a 2-prong approach here if you look at this that's very important, as the chief mentioned. Law enforcement can do so much. But one of the things that we learned over time too is that partnerships are invaluable, and also the use of technology and intelligence to help us to identify the targets we need to go after is as important. So as you hear about the successes of technology such as ShotSpotter and bringing that together with some of the other technology that we employ in the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network on crime scene recovery, crime gun recoveries, crime gun tracing, our goal is to take that information and be more intelligence-driven on targeting. The successes they have when a shooting actually occurs and they're able to apprehend those shooters is important. But the piece that we have to continue to press on is the piece of getting that information, looking at who are the people we need to go after, the worst of the worst, as we say, who are trigger pullers, and figure out how we can successfully do that. The technology that's being employed is being overlaid so that we can get a clearer picture, so that we can have more of an impact on what we're doing. The fact that the sustainability part, the task forces and technology have led to the ability, in my opinion, to some degree, of keeping firearms issues, shootings, and homicides down in the city of Stockton, which I think is huge and is a lesson for a lot of people to learn. But we wouldn't be able to be successful if we didn't have the partnerships that you see with the sheriff and the police chief and even our civilian partners as far as technology at helping to look at this picture, get a holistic approach as to how we want to attack this, and aggressively attacking it. And that's one of the things that I'm here to say is ATF is committed to reducing violent crime in and around the city of Stockton. We will continue to forge and work on making our partnerships even stronger. And I'm confident with the commitments you have from the people in this room that we will continue to have an impact on firearms violence and reducing that violence in the city of Stockton. I want to commend the chief and for the work he's done since we've been here, and I look forward to the partnership. And I think that the direction we're going on is a very positive direction, And not only what am I learning through this aspect of it are we doing in Stockton, but I'm starting to employ some of this in other parts of the state of California and Northern California as well. So I just want to let people know that if you're out there and you have a tendency to use firearms in violent crime, we're coming after you. And our goal is to take those people who are not afraid to pull the trigger off the streets, not only in Stockton, but all around Northern California. Chief, thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. And Sheriff Moore, did you want to talk a little bit about our collaborations?
Thank you, Chief. Just wanted to say that the San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office, in the two operations that we do collaborate on as on a long-term goal, is a very positive aspect. It works very well for us. As you know, the County of San Joaquin has pockets throughout the city and are very much a contiguous large area in East Stockton. So we see the benefits of this program, we see the collaboration benefits, and we will continue to work with that in the future, and I'm committed to working with the Chief to make that impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Chief. So you've heard a lot here today about really the way we do business now in this area. And it is the dawn of a new day, the way we define our police work and our strategies now. Being much more data-driven, being much more strategic, relying on technology, being much more regional than we have in the past. And really, you saw some examples, heard about some examples, very specific arrests, investigations that were done here in Stockton that I believe is giving some relief to some of these neighborhoods that are under siege or feel that they're under siege. And it really comes down to, in my opinion, a combination of good old-fashioned police work, which is hard work by the officers, law enforcement staff out there in the field, and technology. And when those two come together, we can really make a difference in the way we police and the way that we do law enforcement in this community. So thank you for being here today, and we'll now afford the chance for a few questions.
Do you know how many shots per day, per week, per month you see or hear reports of against Stockton?
So that's a great question, because there certainly are spikes during certain times of the year, and as I mentioned, one of them is New Year's, and that's where we're really trying to get ahead of the curve on that and curb that type of gunfire on and around the New Year's season. On average, we do get, throughout the city of Stockton, about 14 or 15 reports of gunfire on a daily basis. So that's pretty much the average of what we see here in Stockton. New Year's, actually, I do have that information. It's over 150 is about what we get during the New Year's. Now, that's early in the from late afternoon, early evening into the early morning of the next day. So.
Triangulation, how
Mhm.
can you spot something like this? You're gonna block within half a block.
Oh, so regarding the technical question as to how precise is it, I may have a CEO from ShotSpotter respond to that. But from my perspective, with the information I have, it's precise enough to where we can go right to where the shooting occurred, and we can find evidence, whether it be shell casings or other things. So it's really a matter of feet. Did you want to add anything to that?
5 to 10 feet. So our technology uses. Sorry. Yeah. Yep. So typically the precision is within 5 to 10 feet of actually where the shot was fired. Our technology uniquely uses a collaborative approach whereby several sensors are in an area, and when a gun is fired, that sound will hit each sensor at a slightly different time. And when 3 or more sensors are able to detect that particular impulsive event, it's able to triangulate using a time of arrival calculation to precisely locate on a lat-long basis where the shots were fired. So when we send the alert over to our agency partners, we're sending an address, but we're also sending a very precise lat-long coordinate so that we can direct the officer to kind of get out of their patrol car and look for evidence in the front yard, in the backyard, 3 feet from the front porch, on the sidewalk, et cetera. Because I think it's very important in this continuum of developing a gun crime intel capability that if you're not able to capture a perp or aid a victim, the next best thing is to get shell casings, which then could be run through the NIBIN system to help build cases in the future. So this is really a part of an overall gun crime intelligence platform. We're going to be able to precisely detect any time a gun's been fired in our coverage area very precisely on a real-time basis and hopefully get officers there where they can quickly recover physical evidence to help cases going forward.
Mr. Clark, your folks elsewhere are hearing this as well, and the alerts come from your office to Stockton PD?
Yes, correct. So what we do as a part of our managed services offering, the system does a very good job of detecting and disambiguating non-gunfire noises, but it's not perfect. So we'll have each of those impulse events go to a 24/7 incident review center where we have trained acoustic professionals that are listening to those acoustic events, those gunshot events, and making the final determination if in fact that's a gunshot or not. Once that confirmation is made, they're also adding any additional contextual information that can aid a patrol officer dispatch response to that particular event, such that, look for physical forensic evidence in this location. And in a few times, frankly, from an officer safety point of view, I don't think it's happened here in Stockton yet, but in some other California locations where we are, we've been able to identify a multi-shooter situation where our folks can listen to it and can tell by the cadence of the activations that they're dealing with at least 2 shooters, maybe 3 shooters. And that's critically important that contextualized information be sent along with the alert, because you want to dispatch that particular event in a very different way than you dispatch in a single shooter incident.
So has your company donated your time and equipment to this pilot program?
Yes, for a period of time. So we had a vision by way of introduction. I grew up in Oakland, California. I went to school here in Stockton, California. So Stockton has a very soft place in my heart. And we saw what Chief Jones was trying to do here around getting at the gun violence issue. And we wanted to be here at really literally ground zero here, showing that our technology could provide efficacy in his efforts and the community efforts to get at this chronic gun crime problem. So we decided to deploy on a very limited basis, a very small deployment to prove the efficacy. And I think part of the idea of this particular presser is to kind of get the news out there that shows that this is a part of an overall strategy that the chief has to get at gun crime and get financial support so that we can maintain and, frankly, expand our footprint here in Stockton.
So without financial support, the city's broke. Is there an end date?
Of course,
to
yeah,
pull your equipment down?
yeah, but getting support for this won't be a problem. When you look at the evidence that we've been able to produce and the outcomes we've been able to produce, we're very confident that we're going to be able, with the chief's efforts and our efforts, to be able to get funding to sustain and expand this program.
What's this cost?
So our typical cost is $45,000 to $65,000 per square mile per year.
And the funding sources are likely to be who or what?
The funding sources can come from any number of places. A lot of agencies get support from the DOJ, from the COPS office. They will get support from HUD. We've gotten support from the Department of Transportation. There's private-public partnerships. Oftentimes, agencies can reach out to get support for these kind of efforts. We haven't put together our strategy just yet on the funding options, but there's a lot of resources out there that we can go tap, and we're pretty confident that with this story and these fact patterns that we're going to be able to get people to step up and work with the chief and the city of Stockton to be able to continue our efforts here.
And the pilot program ends when?
We don't have a hard date just yet, so we don't want to predict when that hard date is, but there is one. We're just not announcing that right now.
So, Chief, what's the goal here? Where do you think you're going to find money for this? Is that your job to find that money?
Well, certainly it's going to be a burden on me to attempt to find some of that funding. But it can come through a number of ways. It can come even through, as mentioned, private partner, public partnerships. Could be through fundraising and donations. It may be through some grants and assistance from, as mentioned, other state and federal agencies, as well as freeing up of other city funds. So there are a number of ways. But it's important to know we're still in the trial period. We're still in the pilot program. So we will look at that potential funding source down the road when we can complete our analysis as to the successes of the pilot program.
What's your estimate of coverage area in square miles? How much do you think would be adequate?
Well, as we all know, in Stockton there are a number of hot spots. We do hotspot policing, and so I certainly would like to see all of those hotspots of the serious gun violence to be covered in some manner. Right now, it's just a couple square miles. I don't want to get any more detail than that, but certainly to expand upon that throughout the rest of the city would be a goal.
Do you have can you say an estimate of 20 square miles or?
Not at this time, because we're still doing the analysis to begin with the pilot program, and then we'll continue the data analysis as we go on.
What other cities, you said 6 cities in California?
So we're in East Palo Alto, Richmond, San Pablo, Oakland, California, of course, San Francisco, Redwood City in California, and then there's another 70-plus cities nationwide that we're in. Washington, D.C. is an example, which is our largest client with almost about 20 square miles deployed there. Boston, Newark, New Jersey. We can go down the list. We can actually get you a formal list later.
Have any cities
Okay.
said thanks, but it's not working as well as it would like?
Yeah, so technically, we've had very good success with the system. We've always been able to derive gunshots through the use of our technology. And we've had a very good track record with agencies being able to use the data to really get at gun crime problem. We've had a few cities, a very few cities, that perhaps haven't had the leadership and vision around how to get at gun crime using the data, and so we've had those cities not be successful from a programmatic point of view, but there's no issue at all with our technical delivery of gunshot data detection and analysis platform. There's no question about that.
Chief, can you say once more, you was about 50% of the reported gunshots have gone down since the beginning of this, is that right?
In that pilot area, we did see when it rolled out in August, we saw over 80 incidents of gunfire during that first month, and it has reduced about 50%. Now, again, it's also important to keep in context the citywide trend as well, which we have seen about 50% reductions in shootings this year compared to last year. But on this month-to-month basis, we've seen some results. And again, we need to further analyze exactly what that might be attributed to. And I think it's probably a combination of the community stepping up. It's a combination of our proactive efforts, this technology, some significant arrests that we've made in the area. So that's the exciting part, is that it's very encouraging news, but we will continue to assess and analyze exactly what the information shows.
Right now, just one area?
That is correct. But it is important to know that, we can move it too. We can move it to another location or expand to other locations possibly in the future.
The 80 incidents that were in that area, how many were investigated? How many arrests?
I don't have the exact number, but we do have these 4 or 5 highlighted incidents that we've had. But we'll probably have a further analysis of that as time goes on.
Mr. Clark, have you ever had any of your equipment targeted by people who see it and know what it is?
The short answer is no. We've had very good success. There's over 4,000 sensors that we've deployed nationwide and have not had an issue at all with tampering. The thing to note about our sensors is, sorry. Apologize, we need more of you, Chief. The thing about our sensors is that they don't require line of sight the way video monitoring assets do. They can sit in the middle of rooftops, so they don't, not requiring line of sight. They're oftentimes obfuscated from public view. So we tend not to have people tamper with them. In fact, many of the communities where we're deployed, again, and we can't de-emphasize enough, we can't emphasize enough how important it is to have community engagement around this. To many communities, they support this idea of a acoustic gunshot detection analysis platform being in their communities, because from a gun violence point of view, we know that many of these cities or communities are underserved, because oftentimes, sadly, gunfire has become the new normal. So we don't see people calling 911. Sadly, the number of merit for us is about 80% of the time people don't call 911 when they hear gunfire. Now, all of a sudden, when our technology is deployed, they can see a very quick and immediate response of law enforcement getting a cop to a dot, literally getting out of the car, being able to recover physical forensic evidence, being able to knock on doors in a very informed, ground truth way to investigate shots that have been fired, and it's improved community confidence, and it's enabled communities to feel like they can get more on side with law enforcement in responding to gunfire. So they're generally supportive, and so we don't have people self-actualize to go figure out how to rip down this infrastructure when it's providing such a valuable service to them.
Is this a typical scenario in which you go into a city, help them, funding is going to be an issue, a news conference like this develops support, and then the funding comes in, and that's why we're all here, right?
This is very unusual. Yeah, this is the first time we've done something like this. We typically have cities just step forward and do a 5 square mile, 4 square mile deployment, and they have the funding all worked out. In this particular situation, again, because Stockton is very much in the news in terms of how they're responding to public safety with so few patrol resources, sworn resources, we wanted to be here to be able to show that technology could be an enabler to help that narrative out from a public safety point of view. So, you know, we get obviously some marketing benefit out of it, as you will. Again, I went to school here in Stockton and had an opportunity to spend some time with the chief, and saw his passion and vision around serving this community, and we just wanted to get on side with it with the full confidence that we knew he would be able to produce the results with his patrol resources and in his commitment. And once we thought we delivered those results, we could be successful fundraising. So there's still a lot more analysis to be done, as the chief has said, and we're confident at the end of the day we'll be able to work together collaboratively to get this program sustained and possibly even expanded.
Speakers have time for one more question. Can you describe how the process works? I mean, does it start with shots going off and then going straight to the sensors, then to your people who analyze it, and back to dispatch, or what?
You got it. You nailed it. Exactly.
Where are your technicians at?
We're in Newark, California.
And how long does the process take?
Less than 30 to 40 seconds from the shots fired to the time that that particular alert is shot over to the agency.
So real quick time.
Yeah, it's real time, near real time. Okay?
Great. So thank you for the rest of you that are up here with me today. Appreciate you coming out, and we're excited to continue to work on the analysis of this pilot area. Thanks.